Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Rasick. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my synodocological co-host, Chris Rasick. Surprised I got that one out on the first try. Today, we've got Casey Stewart with us on the show. Casey is a longtime Amazon seller. Some might even say an unk of the seller world. Casey's also an incredibly smart seller and one heck of a sourcer. He's also started a company to help sellers claw back the sales tax that they've paid on their inventory. Matter of fact, the only service that I know of that does this. So today we're going to dive into Casey's background a little bit. We're going to talk a little sourcing. And of course, we're going to learn how refundsalestax.com can help you put some money back in your own pocket and in your own business. Casey, welcome to the show, man. I'm glad you had time for us, man.
Yeah, man, I've been looking forward to it. Sorry it took us a little while to get there.
Hey, that's all right. You're here now, man. Before we dive in, you guys know the drill. It takes us minutes to prepare for each one of these shows. So if you find some value in this episode, do us a solid. Share this out on social media. Drop a comment below. Let us know what you learned. And tag Chris and I whenever you do share it so we can thank you personally. It means a ton to us, and it helps keep us motivated to get more of these podcasts out for you guys. All right. So, Casey, let's dive into the deep end or set the table a little bit. And I kind of want to go back to the beginning. What got you into selling on Amazon and like when did it become like a full-time gig for you?
So I've been selling on Amazon since 2015, 2016. Yeah, 2016, mid 2016. It's kind of an odd story, and I think it may be familiar to a lot of entrepreneurs listening. Is I owned a software company at the time. I had been working from home for close to a decade, maybe more at that time. And honestly, I just wanted to, not just working from home, but working on a computer. I just wanted to get out of the house. I wanted to do something other than what I was doing, me and my wife had moved from where we grew up and where we were raised, and one of those kind of weird things that I think a lot of people more understand now post-COVID, but pre-COVID nobody understood is, most of the people you meet at church or through family or you went to school with them, but if you work from home and you move to a new place, there's not really a great way to meet people, to just, make friends and things like that. So I did what any normal sane person would do, and my solution to feeling socially isolated and stuck at home was to find a new business that took me out of the home, because that's a normal response, right? And so I was like, okay, well, as a kid and even as a young adult, I really enjoyed going to garage sales. Thought it was a lot of fun, kind of treasure hunt kind of thing. I really enjoyed garage selling. And so I was like, okay, I have known for years that I could probably make money, going to garage sales, buying things and flipping them on eBay. And I basically started going on the weekends. I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. Like I'll just go, Saturday morning, wander around, chat with people, buy some stuff, throw it on eBay, whatever. And I did that for a little while. And at the same time, my wife was looking for something to do. And so a few months into that, she signed up to be an Amazon seller. And basically a few months into that, I was helping her, kind of get off the ground, kind of get things organized and stuff. And it timed out to where a chain here in the southern U.S. called Hastings Entertainment, which was kind of like a Barnes and Noble / Blockbuster kind of place, was going. Had filed bankruptcy. This was, again, late 2016. And so we ended up sourcing a lot of new products from them. They had toys, figures, media, just everything. They were a very, very large store, and there were a lot of them in Texas in particular. And I think the real moment where we like shifted from this is just a side thing to, oh, there's real money in this, was when when one of the liquidation managers approached me about doing an in-buy on the store that was maybe 200 yards from our front door on the last day at like 6 p.m. He's like, hey, do you want to, buy every single item remaining in the store for, I think he quoted me like $5,000. And at that point, if I had to guess, there was at least $300,000 or $400,000 at MSRP and inventory in there. It was. I mean, there was at least 10,000 DVD and Blu-ray and box sets, all brand new. There was 15,000 CDs, 20,000 books. It was honestly probably like it was a buy that I still haven't ever had a buy that good offered to me, and I was just like, I live in a duplex and I drive a Corolla and it's 6 p.m. I can't. I was like, if you'd approached me like 3 hours ago, I would have rented a U-Haul and this would all be mine. But there's nothing I can do. I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know to be talking to him about it in advance. Like he just kind of sprung it on me at the last minute there, and I was just like, man, we could come back tomorrow. Like I can pay for it tonight, but it's physically impossible. I don't have any place to store it. There's just nothing, and so I ended up passing on that. But if you've never done a store closing sale, the way they tend to work is the liquidation managers tend to be over multiple stores and they stagger their closes. So that was his first store. And so he still had like 3 or 4 left. The rest ended up all being just much, much worse than the store that was right by us, of course. But I did end up picking up 35,000 CDs across like 5 stores for, I think I paid 10 cents each on. And it was like a 60-40 mix of like new, used, but and probably 20% of it just was throwaway, right? Just take it to Goodwill and get rid of it. And but it doesn't take many new ones selling at even $15, making 9-10 after fees at the time when the fees were much lower. That pays for 100+ units every time. So and then so we do these buys. I probably had more cost in employee time because I scooped up some people and was basically like, hey, I'll pay you whatever per hour. Like, come drive all over Texas with me and let's go buy CDs. And I probably had more money in them and the U-Hauls than I did the actual cost of goods. But and then I got my first fun Amazon lesson, which was 3 weeks later. They gated CDs. Oops. And that let me know how that was going to go long term, I think. And a few months after that, I had been in a couple of Facebook groups, ones that I'm sure both of y'all were in at that point. FBA Sourcing Simplifiers, All Star, something like that. Had the crazy guy with no shirt. And you know who I'm talking about. And yeah, right. But we had Reezy Resells was running around talking about shoes at the time. This was like late 2016, Christmas time, maybe early 2017. And I'd watched a few videos. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Like footwear looks interesting. I was like, if I see an opportunity, I guess I'll like give that a try. Because at the time, I still owned a software company where I was pushing 60+ hours a week as a partner in it. And so this was really like a weekend kind of business for me with Amazon. And, it was 6 months in, I was probably only doing 3,000, maybe 4,000 a month in sales. And I kind of got my, probably like March of 2017, I walked into a store to buy a pair of shoes, big sports store, similar to like Dick's Sporting Goods. And they were running a special on all their clearance cleats. They were like half off of their normal price, 50% off all the clearance cleats. And they had, I don't know, probably 500 pairs of clearance cleats. But on the back wall, it was the craziest thing. I've still never seen a store as bad as this. That the back wall at the time, apparently their policy was to take the shoes, rip them out of the box, zip tie them, and throw them on the back wall. They had over 10,000 pairs of clearance footwear. And it's because corporate would mark them down by 5 or 10%, throw the boxes away. And I was just like, but these are worse prices than your normal sell price. Like, of course, these aren't selling. Y'all had better sales than this before they went clearance. And so the store manager basically I was like, what do I need to buy to get the 50% off on normal shoes? And she was like, I don't know, 100 plus pairs. And so I think I bought like 300 pairs. They all had to be hand overridden at the register, and she got a call from corporate. They were furious on Monday. But she was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all of this clearance that's just piling up, collecting dust. And the footwear did well enough. The return rates, of course, were horrendous, especially on the cleats, because I was getting the returns that were all, kids had worn them for a game or two and felt like that was a reasonable thing to return. And Amazon's just like, oh yeah, sure, give them their money back. And but footwear opened up something that was really important for me, which is that at the time I had very little time and I had a lot of capital, especially relative to my time. I was only doing $2,000 or $3,000 a month in sales, and my first footwear buy I dropped like $7,000. So I had a lot more capital that I could put in play than I did opportunity. That I did time to deal with it. And so basically, what footwear opened up was it let me get more sales, more profit per hour. Even if the ROI may not have been as high as some of the other stuff, or the turn rate wasn't as high. It was just like, if you can prep 20 shoes in an hour, my ASP was 80, so it was $1,600 an hour in sales per hour of prep. And I couldn't find that in other areas without going to like wholesale or something like that. I don't think. And so, yeah, that really, like, within 2 months of that, we were doing 30,000 a month, still just on the weekends. And that's when I kind of started planning my exit from my software company. The business we were in had already kind of run its course. I could tell we were on a downswing. And then my business partner at the time was one of the smartest people I've ever known, honestly. Like, he is one of the few people I've known who I am 100% sure is smarter than me, but he did not have the emotional stability to be an owner. He really needed to be an employee who, when things blow up, he still gets to clock out and go home. And especially with software, when things blow up, you don't get to clock out and go home. You just keep at it, and so about every 3 or 4 months, he would, just kind of show up and want to quit. And couldn't really blame him. I get it. Owning isn't for everybody. He would have been much happier as an employee. So I had just kind of gotten, tired of the stress, and I was frankly making more on the weekends than I was in the software company at that point. So I just we had a product that we had been working on releasing for, 3 years at that point, probably 2.5, 3 years. We had a core group of, like, it was a software as a service, B2B. So we had a core group of clients who were all paying us, a couple of thousand plus a month each, some of them more than that. And so we had told them for a couple of years now, and these are people I'd known for 5, 6, 7 years, that we were working on this rebuild. And basically, I stayed long enough to get that launch because I didn't want my name associated with a company that told everybody we were doing something for years and then at the last minute just kind of pulled out and left everybody hanging, right? And it was a rough couple of months. Software launches are always pretty rough. I think the last 6 weeks I probably made less than minimum wage. I was working, 19, 20 hours every single day for 30 plus days. And it just, I don't know, that's just what it was, I guess, at the time. And I still sometimes do, health permitting, I still sometimes do those kind of hour, longer 16, 17 hours for 30 plus days, but that's going to be, Christmas or something like that. And it's kind of, the software launch we were running on, I've got to get this fixed because not only are my customers, having problems, but like people I viewed as friends who I'd known for 5+ years are having issues with their business, and it's, our fault, as it were. But yeah, Chris, like y'all, like I know Chris Grant here has launched software in the past. I don't know if you have, Chris. That's software launches are just like that. The only bug-free software is the one that doesn't exist. If it's in your head, it's probably bug-free, but you never know what you're going to run into until you put it in the hands of clients. you can try to figure out how they're going to do things that you don't expect, but you don't know what you don't know, I guess. Um, and so after that, I was just like, okay, I just want to sell my half of the software company and just focus on Amazon full time. My wife wanted me out of the software company because, to quote her, it's killing you. And I didn't really disagree. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've told that story. But yeah, so that was pretty much it. From there, we really just focused on footwear, and then 2017 Christmas, we kind of fell backwards into toys by accident. I had heard how good they were, and I hated going to Black Friday during the daytime, so we were at Walmart like 3 a.m. and me and my wife were, and we were just picking up random. I was like, oh, if they have this electronic item still, I'll get one, but I'm not going to wait in line and deal with the crowd over it, right? And I went to find an employee to ask a question. And with my wife in electronics, well, she wanders over to Barbie, and she knew how to scan for products, and she scans. And apparently, while I was gone, she had scanned a bunch of items. I come back, she's like, "Hey, I think you should probably look at this stuff." And I go and I look. I'm like, "Oh, there's 50+% margin on every single item in the Barbie." For some reason, 2017 Christmas, there was a Barbie shortage. I've never seen it repeated. I look for it every year, but I've literally never seen it happen again. It's weird how that happened. One year I remember there was a Hallmark ornament shortage. Never repeated. Every single year since then, they've been terrible for me. But that year there was a Barbie shortage, and I was just like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing toys now. And so, 3 a.m. Black Friday morning, we suddenly had to figure out how Q4 worked. Because I'd heard people talking about how great toys were and Q4 was, but I'd never actually, I guess again, I was very footwear focused at that point. We just had never actually really dug into it since Hastings had shut down. But yeah, so that's the gist of it. At this point, I do a lot of footwear. I do a lot of toys during, especially Q4, but even outside of Q4, I buy some amount of toys. The house is always overflowing. The storage buildings are also always overflowing. I spend about 700 to 750,000 a year RA, and when I say I do literally mean I myself spend that by myself. Some of the bigger rounds where I know I'm going to be really, where it's kind of a race to some degree, I will bring an employee with me to help, make back to back 16-hour days with 12,000+ steps a little more manageable. But most of it I'm just by myself. And it's a combination of things. I'm faster at RA than most people are. Probably just repetition, honestly. Buying that much, you can imagine how many Keepa charts I've seen. It does not take me. My biggest problem is that sometimes I go fast enough that I miss, the sizing doesn't actually match the shoe or something like that. That's a really big problem in footwear. And I've had to kind of change my strategies in the past, or my process in the past few years, because the catalog's just gotten so bad, because Amazon invited a bunch of black hat actors onto the platform and decided to, in response to them destroying the catalog, their solution was to make it hard for all the legitimate people to fix the catalog, but the black hat people can still destroy it. So I don't know how they managed to pull that off, but that seems to be where we ended up. And just Texas has a lot of retail. It does. I think it's because our land is cheap. Texas and Florida probably have the most retail stores in the U.S. And within 15 miles of my house in a circle, there are 12 super Walmarts. There's 9 Targets. And then, DFW has 40 Targets, probably 70 Walmarts. It's enough that I don't know how many we've got. Even mid-size retailers like Dick's, we've got 17 Dick's in DFW. Wow. It's just, it's an astronomical amount of retail, and every major city in Texas is like that. And I know that the Rust Belt and the Northeast and stuff and the Eastern Seaboard, they're not like that, I assume, because the land's just not cheap enough to make that viable. But yeah, so that's why I'm really RA focused. That, and the whole point of this business was to get me out of the house and not, not sequestered away on a computer.
Yeah, absolutely. After all of that journey, what led you to start refundsalestax.com? Like that's was it just scratching your own itch or something else?
That was part of it. So it's kind of an odd story, which I think is going to be the case for any first of its kind business. I'm pretty sure we're a first of our kind, because if we weren't, I would have already used the service and wouldn't have lost $50,000+ in sales tax to the statute of limitations in Texas. So I've been doing this for 8, 9-ish years now, something like that, and I knew that in Texas there is a way to get your money back from the state for incorrectly paid sales tax. My earliest, when I first started doing footwear heavily, I couldn't sell, Nike and Adidas and any of the major brands, right? They were gated at the time. So, but again, I live in Texas, so there's tons of retail. Reebok was open, and Saucony was open, and DFW had. I was driving 2+ hours, but DFW had 3 or 4 Reebok outlets and a Saucony store at the time. But while the stores themselves were friendly to resellers, corporate wasn't, so we couldn't do tax exempt. So the first year I probably spent $70,000-$80,000 just with one Reebok store, and in Texas it's an 8.25% tax rate, so it was $6,000-ish in sales tax just from that one store. And I knew from research that there was a way to get the money back, but it's one of those things where what I believe is the case, and this seems to be the case in every state, is I think it's one of those things where legislatures put laws in place, and a lot of times the laws are actually just written by like outside organizations, but they put laws in place where they're like, okay, somebody who overpays sales tax or incorrectly pays sales tax, we should have a process for them to get the money back. And then that goes to the state departments of revenue. And, I think a lot of times the people who are writing the websites and the regulation side of it and setting up the processes are like, yeah, like legally we have to allow you to do this, but that doesn't mean we have to make it easy, right? That doesn't mean we have to make it easy for you to get the money back. And, and then our business model is so niche that if you're a wholesaler, reseller, and you occasionally have to pay sales tax, or something goes wrong, you pay sales tax, at the time, you can, there in pretty much every state, not every single state, but probably 40, maybe 45 of them, there's a process where when you're paying your quarterly or monthly sales tax, you can basically take a credit for the money that you mispaid already. So if you bought something from Reebok that you weren't supposed to and you paid $100 in sales tax. When I go to pay my quarterly sales tax to Texas, I'm like, okay, I collected $250 from customers. I'm going to remit that to y'all, but I paid $100 to Reebok, so I'm going to take that as a credit and just pay y'all $150. And basically, I'll pocket the $100 from the customer to make up for the $100 that I overpaid elsewhere. So if you're a normal retailer, that is the primary way you do it. The problem is that, one, we're e-commerce. So even though I live in one of the wealthiest and most populous states in the U.S., it's, the sales tax that I was collecting from customers at the time was a drop in the bucket compared to the amount that I was spending. And now especially it's bad because Marketplace Facilitator has just completely taken that away from us. Even if you knew how to do that pre-Supreme Court ruling and pre-Marketplace Facilitator, now most of us actually have no sales tax that we collect, right? Even Shopify sellers now, from what I understand, Shopify is taking care of their sales tax. Like, nobody actually collects and remits their own sales tax anymore in this space. And so that was the primary way in most states you were expected to do that, was you weren't expected to have a lot. And if you did have some, you could easily take it as a credit. So as a result, the service doesn't exist. And then on top of that, the CPAs, the accountants, even the tax accountants, and those people who specifically deal with sales tax, nobody knows this is a thing. Over the course of 6-7 years, I talked to at least a dozen CPAs. I was like, how do you what is the process for recovering the sales tax? And every single CPA, and I've, most of the clients I've talked to of our service now have said they had the same experience. Every one of them goes, "You can't do that." And I was just like, "Well, no, you can. I mean, Texas Department of Revenue says you can on their website. They just don't tell me how." And they're like, "Wait, they do?" I'm like, "You're not the person who needs to fix this for me, though." So, if you like, you're not the one to figure it out. And that was every single CPA I talked to, no matter their specialty, no matter how expensive they were. None of them. It's just not common outside of a very weird sphere, which is primarily RAOA. So I want to say at this point, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I finally bit the bullet, sat down, read lots and lots and lots of state regulations, state laws, and kind of pieced it all together and figured out how to do it for Texas. And the part of the problem with the process is, and this is true for pretty much every state, they're all very slow. So if you make a mistake, you may find out in 3 months that you made a mistake. Well, now you get to start over and try to correct that mistake, and then you find, oh, well, you made a different mistake. Start over again and reset the clock again and resubmit everything. It could take you, if you don't have a good starting point, it can take a very long time to work through all of the little gotchas that, again, they kind of put in place. A lot of it is just to prevent fraud. At the end of the day, their view, and I think it's a reasonable view from their point of view, is that they don't lose anything if you can't get your sales tax back, but they do lose if you commit fraud and get away with it. So they want you to have everything in order and everything exactly the way they want it. But eventually I did, figure it out, and I did finally get my first. I had done a small submission, maybe $2,500 was the first check. And then I did another submission for mine and collected another like 7 or 8,000 from that. And maybe a year into having figured the process out in Texas, I was scrolling on Facebook one day. I'd been thinking already about turning this into a business, at least for Texas, because I knew that there were plenty of other sellers out there who had this problem. One of the big ones was Adidas. I was racking up. Oh, did we lose Chris?
No, you're good.
There he is. I was racking up, 150,000 a year at Adidas, and even though they were extremely reseller friendly at the time, they didn't take our tax exempt. So, just 8 to 12 grand there, and I knew there were Adidas resellers who were doing much, much more than that. And so maybe a year in, I was scrolling Facebook one day and kind of got that nudge to take the next step, which was actually somebody y'all interviewed not too long ago, and I've known for pretty close to that full time, Jassim Issa. Jassim had posted on Facebook on one of our shared spaces that it was like, hey, does anybody know how to recover sales tax in any of these states? And he had a list, and Texas was on there. And he's like, willing to pay. I just need to figure this out because we have a very big tax bill, sales tax. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I can help you with Texas. So I reached out to him, told him I'd done it a couple of times and could take care of it. He just needed to basically, similar process to what we do now. It's just, it was less organized at the time, but, send us the receipts. I'd pull all the data together and get it submitted. And, at the time I was getting like 3 to 4 month turnaround times from submission to getting a check. But, when you bring somebody that large to the table and your check sizes go from, mid to high 4 figures to mid to high 5 figures, sometimes the states have a different process, we found out. And so it ended up taking more like 9 months turnaround on that one. And the process was really smooth on their end, other than being, me having to tell them over and over, like, yeah, there's no update. The state is auditing it, and now the state is making sure that you don't owe them any money from other sales tax or other tax sources or tax liens, and this other department needs to check and make sure you don't owe them any, like every way they can to not send you a check at the end of the day. But they did eventually cut him a check, and basically when they cut that, he was like, okay. He's like, so this worked. Really happy with the service. We'll get you the next year for Texas. And can you help us with any, do you think you can help us with any of these other states? And, Jassam's operation, I think, he talked to you about it on the show. It's very large all over the U.S. And I was like, well, maybe let me start digging. And so that was kind of the jumping off point to get me to dig into how other states do it. And, at this point, we've done it in close to 24 states. We don't currently have 24 on our list that we're accepting right now because, frankly, the laws are always changing. So somebody, a state I was able to do a couple of years ago, I may no longer be able to do. But that was kind of the start of it. It was a really good jump off point because at that point I was able to go, okay, like here's 7 other states that I can go into, knowing that if I put the time in, I've got a client who is already there, already ready to go, and I can learn the ropes there. And so that just kind of slowly, built to this point. I've been pretty methodical about it because I didn't want to bring on too many clients all at once and part of why this kind of service has never existed, I think, is that doing it in one state is difficult. Doing it in, right now, I think we're doing it in 20, and I've got, 50 plus clients who are all at different stages, and every state has slightly different processes. And it's a lot of moving parts where I have to, some states I have to contact the supplier and then contact them a second time after 30 days have passed, and then wait another 30 days. Then I can submit to the state. And some I have to go, can't remember which state off the top of my head. I feel like it's Georgia. I have to go for every single supplier we submit for after I wait 90 days and contact them multiple times with a paper trail. I then have to go and sign an affidavit for every single one with a notary, basically pinky promise swearing that we will not commit tax fraud. Because a lot of states' biggest thing is that they don't want you to get the money back from the state and then go back to the retailer and get them to refund you the money. And then that retailer will turn around and try to get the money back from the state. And suddenly, instead of the state being correctly at 0, the state is now negative on your tax refund, on your sales tax. And so I think that's a lot of why nobody's done this kind of service is there's just a lot of moving parts involved in it.
Yeah.
At scale.
I wish you'd been around to, well, at least taking on other clients a year ago or 2 years ago. That's when I went through this, and it took like 2 years to get. I got a good amount back. I got like 50,000 back, but it was a process.
Which state was it again?
Ohio.
Okay, yeah. Ohio's pretty slow.
Yeah. And what a whale for your first client.
Right.
An absolute whale.
I mean, if they're not the largest RAOA person in the U.S., I'm pretty sure they are. Like,
They've got to be.
Yeah, I don't like. I don't even know who second place is. I don't know that there's anybody even close at that scale. I don't know that there's many that are over the 50 million line, much less closer to the 9-figure line like that.
Yeah, I knew of one that was pushing 70 million, but it has since dwindled quite a bit from RA. Thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Rasick has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show.
Okay. And the fact that like Jassam is so heavy on RA, that is a very large, very sprawling operation. It's very impressive. Like, yeah. Speaking of, hard, lots of things moving at different speeds and stuff, like their setup is got to be pretty impressive. So,
yeah. So, Casey, you got into it a little bit, but if you could expand on in layman's terms, essentially, how does the process actually work? Is it just simply a matter of sending receipts to you, and then you handle it from there, and you're just working with the different departments in each state, or can you explain, kind of summarize the actual process?
Right. Yeah, no. So in every state, it pretty much starts the same, which is that you sign up through our website, um, and we've got a bit of onboarding that'll kind of give you some best tips on getting us your receipts, whether that's photos of the receipts, scans that you've already got. With email, we have a very nice process with Gmail, if you use it, where basically you can, and if you already do, makes it even easier. But basically, you can put all of your emails into a folder, and there's a system that Google has called Google Takeout that'll let you export individual folders from your email, or all of your emails, but please don't do that to us. But individual folders, and you can basically just select the folder, export it. It's a single file. You upload that, and then we built software that takes that file, rips out all the emails, and we begin to work on them there. But regardless of how you get them to us, yeah, you just send us all your files. We take care of everything. I don't, if you if you've named your receipts, I'm not going to pay attention to it. There's no information that I want from you. If you've got QuickBooks, I don't want to say I don't care, but honestly, it's my view on this is that if I'm going to go in front of the state and sign papers that basically say, I'm committing perjury if I'm not on the up and up, then I want to be the one who pulls all the numbers together, who pulls all the data. I'm a huge fan of VAs, including foreign VAs. I use them, in my Amazon business. We do not use anybody who is not U.S. based for this service, because my thought process is that if I get called in front of an auditor and they go, "Hey, why is this thing complete nonsense?" I don't want to go, "Well, there's this person in the Philippines," and that's not a conversation I want to have. I also just prefer the accountability in this case of we are all under at least a similar federal legal system. If somebody were to do something, basically, I feel like that keeps people from even getting the idea of doing something kind of sketchy. It just improves the accountability side of things. Obviously, suing a foreign VA for getting you thrown in jail or fined massively by a state it's not going to work out well for you. And along with that, though, I don't accept any information from the client. So we just take the raw receipts, the raw invoices, and we work it all ourselves. Part of why the service has taken, I mean, I've technically been doing this for about 2 years now, but the service, part of the slow ramp up was the organizational side, but also part of it is with my background in software. We've been working on custom software to help make this process a little bit faster on our end and reduce the man hours, because the sheer amount of information that the states want from every single receipt that they want you to collate for them. When we did the JASM work, it was on average taking 2 to 3 minutes per receipt, and JASM had thousands of receipts, and since then we've processed hundreds of thousands of receipts, and just the sheer manpower requirements would have been astronomical if it was completely hand done. And also, frankly, the risk of error goes up dramatically in that scenario. So we spent about 6 months, me and a really good friend of mine who's a great programmer. Basically, we custom rolled our own solution to this because it's the same problem I ran into in my old software company, funny enough, where most of the OCR systems and most of the AI systems, they're pretty accurate, but pretty accurate doesn't cut it if I'm going in front of a state government, right? Like if I'm going to Texas and they go, "Hey, you owe my client $400 in sales tax," and they look at it and they're like, "That's $4." That's not a good conversation to have either. And so 99% accurate sounds great until in practice that means that you're pissing off every single auditor that you speak to, and that's best case scenario, right? And so we had to kind of design our own system where we have, it gets into the weeds, but basically we tested half a dozen different document intelligence services, all the big names you can think of, and some of the smaller ones too. And we, even at their best, they probably only pulled accurate information 50 or 60% of the time. And that is the best thing. Like, that's, best on the market that you can buy. And some of the companies that we were dealing with were the kind where you have to do, you don't see numbers up front. It's not, Amazon, AWS, or whatever. It's all proprietary. And the labor is high enough that I was like, okay, well, if you can take me from a 50% to a 90%, and then I can reduce how much we have to check, then that may be worth the cost. And they may be 5% better at 5 times the cost, and so it just didn't end up working out. But basically, and I'm open about this because I want people to understand that I'm not going to say that we don't make errors, because there is no error-proof system. If it was all human done, humans would make errors. There would be typos. But we do have a lot of sanity checks in place, and I haven't ever had a correction on the dollar side of things. The only thing I can think of is like one time we submitted and like the date was past the statute of limitations. But that's just, hey, we denied this one item, here's the rest of them. But basically what we did is I built out a polling system where it's a 2 of 3. So we've got an AI system in place. And then we have what we call our brute force system, which is, it's dumb, right? It's looking for very, very dumb basic piece of information that are going to be common across receipts, things like zip codes, places that we can kind of pull information from. And basically we need both of those systems to agree with a piece of information before we trust it. So if the AI and the other system are both like, hey, this was definitely purchased in, Dallas, Texas at 75903 or whatever, then that information is almost certainly reliable. If a lot of times those systems actually disagree, in which case that is where a human comes back through and has to hand check all of that information. Or frequently we will only have a single system, whether it's the dumb system or the AI system will pull a result, but the other system doesn't find anything. Then again, you have to have a human go back and check that. So we kind of treat it as a 2 out of 3 polling system, right? If both of the software systems find something and they agree on what that something is, it's generally trustworthy. If they disagree, then it needs a human to come in and tie break the vote. If one of those systems finds something, then we need a human to come in and make that a 2 vote. But we don't let data leave us without having 2 different systems agree on it, as a general rule. At the end of the day, there are, it's pretty rare at this point. It's probably only 3 or 4% of fields that we're pulling, but you do still occasionally have some where none of the systems find anything except the human. But generally speaking, that's going to be, again, things like date or the location, which are, you're not going to have an auditor be like, oh, you're trying to do something sketchy because you said it was in Dallas instead of Fort Worth. That's not going to cause a huge issue with them or upset them. That's just, that happens when you're submitting thousands of receipts. We try not to let it happen. It generally doesn't, but yeah. So sorry, I feel like I got way too in the weeds. I am so sorry. But anyway, so we pull all your information together. You, just like you have to do with your accountant or your lawyer, we have a power of attorney form in every state. It's actually provided by the state, so it's not something that we had written. It is basically, it should be similar to the one your CPA has you sign. Honestly, they should generally just be using the state provided one. And in most states, we specifically limit ourselves to only dealing with sales tax, and then some that will allow us to only sales tax refunds. There's a couple of states that don't allow you to limit what you're interacting with, but this also doesn't prevent you from doing it, right? So if you give me power of attorney to interact with the state on sales tax, well, you can still interact with the state on sales tax to file your forms and do whatever you need to. So it just extends that privilege to me so that I can take care of that side of things. At that point, I personally do a bunch of final sanity checks because I just, as sure a lot of entrepreneurs can understand, I'm a bit of a control freak. So I do a bunch of sanity checks myself at the end to make sure, does the amount of tax here actually make sense, like as a percentage of the totals and things like that, just to try to catch any kind of weird stuff that may have slipped through. And then I take care of the final submission myself with the state. And at that point, it just becomes a waiting game. In some states, recently, some of my smaller submissions to Texas have turned around in a month, which is phenomenal. And then there's states like Ohio where it takes 6 months to hear from anybody, or Georgia and North Carolina. Georgia has been rough. It's 12 plus months just to like even talk to somebody after your submission. Now, the good thing about that is, since there's a statute of limitations, whenever we submit, that generally, like in every single state, that locks in that statute, right? So if the state takes 9 months to get back to us, you don't lose 9 months on your statute of limitations. That number is locked in.
That's good.
And yeah, it's thank goodness. And then, in most states at that point, I will generally hear back from them, and talk to an auditor, kind of explain your business, what we're doing, why you're only filing $0 sales tax with the state, because of marketplace facilitator, and just kind of give them the rundown on our kind of unusual business situation. And in some states, that'll be kind of it, and they'll come back and issue a check, or they'll ask for clarifying information on some items, and then some states I'll have to contact you and be like, hey, can I get a this order report from Amazon from your report section, or Texas, for the really really big submissions, they'll ask for your schedule of accounts with QuickBooks and 2 or 3 months of random credit card statements that match a couple of the transactions over those years. Basically, they usually ask for like one per year that we're submitting, just to kind of prove that these things actually happened. And trying to think, but for the most part, in most states, I've started contacting people on a semi-monthly basis at this point, because the waits are long enough that people are like, hey, what's going on? I'm just like, okay, nothing, because that's just how the process works. And so we're starting to implement more of a regular check-in with clients, just to kind of let them know, like, hey, we haven't heard anything from the state, and the second we do, we'll let you know where we're at in the process. But then I let you know, like, okay, we finished it, and you'll get a check. And sometimes they don't even tell me that they're done. They're just like, suddenly I get a message from a client that's like, hey, I got a check in the mail. What's this? I'm like, that's like,
those are always nice surprises.
Right. I mean, for most of our clients, they didn't know this was even possible, right? This is money that you weren't going to get back, that you assumed was just part of your cost of goods sold, and now it just turns into cash flow. And even for mid-sized sellers, even for small sellers, again, it's 8.25%, or 8% in a lot of states is about. I feel like it's about average. There's a few states where it's like 6, 7, and then there's, I'm trying to remember which state it was. There's one state where it's 12% in some areas, which is crazy.
And that actually leads me to my next question: is like, what's the minimum sales volume, or maybe even like number of years in business where this would make sense for somebody, or like there's got to be someone who the service is not for.
Right. And kind of put this. So obviously, it's not great for wholesalers who are very wholesale oriented. Oddly enough, I've actually had, I didn't expect this, but we have had a couple of private label sellers use our service, because we had one guy in Pennsylvania. That was one of the weirdest submissions I've ever done. He private labeled like beauty products. So I had to submit for taxes back on like 50-pound tubs of beef tallow from Etsy. But he had bought stuff like that. He had bought stickers for his packaging and boxes for his products. And he was just like, I didn't know I didn't have to pay sales tax on it. It's like, going forward, I try to use my tax exempt. But starting out, he's just like, he had racked up a couple of $1,000s in sales tax on stuff that should have been tax exempt. But I would say, for one thing, it kind of depends on what state you're in terms of how difficult the process is. But honestly, like, our percentage, the number we take is the same regardless. So I would say, the process is so hands off for the sellers. We charge $150 deposit on sign up because frankly our lawyers told us we had to charge something or the contract would be hard to enforce. And we don't get paid until after you get a check. So the workload on the seller's end's really minor. I would say at $1,000+ in sales tax over the course of, even if that's going back 3 or 4 years, that at the very least doing that one time is probably worth it. Especially if you're OA, because then you're just like, oh, if you're OA and use Gmail, I've got a couple of suggestions on like ways to search in Gmail and very quickly just pull all of your buy orders to a single folder and export it. And, it's a 15-20 minute kind of process at that point. Yeah, I would say that like if you're a really, really new seller, it's probably not worth it just because you should be focusing on other things and concerned about other things. But you don't need to be very big or in this very long for it to matter. And I also think one of the really important things, right? Margins only seem to ever get smaller every year. And some of my clients, after they've done this a couple of times, obviously they're factoring in my fee, but here in Texas, I've got people who are like, okay, that's 6% cost reduction. There's a lot of buys, especially with OA, where 6% is the difference between that being a mediocre buy and pretty good on your cost of goods. And so once they kind of trust the process, being able to factor that in also tends to just open up more buying opportunities for them than they previously had. Yeah, I would say probably $1,000 in sales tax. So in most states, you're going to be talking $10,000 in spend, which is over the course. I think the shortest state is a 2-year statute of limitations. So if you're again less than a year and pretty small, very part time, it may take you a few years to get there. But if you're 3 or 4 years in and you've been small part time, you probably already have enough sales tax for it to be worth the time and effort. Especially since 10 years ago you needed a relatively expensive scanner to get good scans of RA receipts, and now there's a couple of different free apps from Microsoft and Adobe that they make great PDF receipts. And it's actually one of the things I need to test them. Like I've seen the receipts they make from our clients, but I need to test them and put out instructions into our onboarding on how to use them, because I'm still over here with a $400 Epson scanner, because at the time there you couldn't find anything to do. I think my longest receipt was 19 feet long, and I mean even with a scanner that will do it, that's hard to scan.
Yeah,
but
receipts that are 2 stories big.
Right. I hadn't thought about it like that. Right. That is, I like that. That's good.
So Casey, this is it's quite the sales pitch, right? It's a bunch of money that you didn't think you were going to get back, and the process is hands off for the seller because there's an extreme level of diligence that needs to be done on your part, simply for accuracy and affidavits and everything that you have to swear to, in front of government officials. So what can you tell me, are certain states more significant right now? Would it be more important for sellers in certain states to take advantage of this, in your opinion, whether it be statute of limitations or simply a state that you're familiar with and you can process it quickly?
I mean, so on our website, we've got about 20 states listed that we currently process for. If your state isn't in there, if you'll go through our sign up, it'll ask you, what state you're in. And if it's one of the other ones, you can put down what state you're charged, have been charged sales tax in. And I am actively trying to add, I think I've got about 6 or 7 states left that I believe I'll be able to open up. They've just been kind of lower priority than some of the others because of population sizes and things like that. I basically just I made an Excel sheet with the 50 states and I sorted them by population. I just started at the top and started working my way down when I decided to fully launch. As far as that goes, it's really, I would say it's more of a priority based on you as a seller, how close you are to the statute of limitations, which is going to be a little bit different every state. In Texas and a handful of others, it's 4 years. Most states are 3 or 4 years. And if you're coming up on that, then you're just losing money, right? I've got clients who come in, they've been in the business for 6 years here in Texas, and I'm like, okay, get me your first, if you're like, I had a guy who was pretty decent size. I was like, okay, just give me your first like 6 months. If it's going to take you a little while to pull your files together, give me your first 6 months. I'll submit, a relatively small one for like $5,000. It's like that way you don't have money just disappearing while we pull all the rest of our receipts together, right? Just focus on your old stuff. And if you go on our website, I believe it should show you, double check, make sure that's still the case. It should show you the statute of limitations in every state. And so you should be able to check your state. Okay, never mind. It does not currently. We need to add that.
Oh, it's there.
Oh,
it's
is
there.
it? That just missed it.
But Missouri is solid at 10 years.
Yeah, Missouri's great, right? Like, that was actually one of the ones I was thinking about, because like North Carolina is 2, I want to say. It's like 2 to 3. There's a few that are really strange on statute of limitations because they're not based on when you did the purchase. They're based on the sales tax period that the retailer submits on. And so they're kind of a weird rolling. There's a couple of states that I'm just like, I'm just going to submit a little bit extra past what I think is probably right, and they can just tell me if like, if that's like incorrect, if those are too far back or whatever, because some of the states are very odd on how they do that. But yeah, that would be the main thing, is just, if you're if your business is past your statute of limitations or close to it, that would be the highest priority for me, would just be, getting the money before it just falls off our ability to recover it. I personally lost 50,000+ to that before figuring this process out. And God knows how many receipts I lost before I knew for sure that I desperately need to keep as good of a track of them as I probably should have with inauthentics and stuff, but especially now. But yeah, it very much just depends on your state. I would also just say that, again, the 6%, 6, 7, 8% in some states, even after our fee, that's still a good bit of cash flow. I onboarded somebody here a few weeks ago who's here in Texas, and we were talking about, how they wanted me to submit, because they were basically dealing with statute of limitations concerns. I'm like, okay, well, I can do a small one and we can get that back quickly, or I can do a big one and that's going to take longer. And I was like, and here's how it's going to time out. And they're like, okay, let's do the small one, because then in 3, given the turnaround times you're seeing, I'll get that money back in right at the start of Q4 for a bunch of inventory buying. I'm like, yeah, no, that's kind of what I figured you were going to say when I'm like, hey, would you like $10,000, right at the beginning of November? Because that would just be it is statute of limitations. But I'll also say, if you have receipts that you're not sure, like, oh, I don't know if this will be accepted, right? Send them in. Let me make that call. At this point, I've looked at an unreasonable number of receipts, and some of the stuff that I've actually gotten approved through auditors. Here in Texas, with a client, I'm not going to say who, but they sent me like a dozen or so receipts that were cut in half, but they didn't have the other half of the scan. It was just the bottom half of the receipt. I apologize. The lots of talking is kind of getting in my throat. But and if those receipts had only been for $5 or $10, I just would have been like, okay, we're not going to bother anybody over such a small amount, and I'm not going to ask the client to go find a $5 receipt that has been cut in half. But these were $9,000 receipts with like $900 in big sales tax numbers, and I only had the bottom half of the receipt. And I was like, okay, we're going to submit these to Texas, and we're going to see what they say. So I get in touch with the auditor. And they're like, yeah, so like, what is this? And they're like, I don't even know what store this is from. I was like, okay, it's Dick's. You can see down here, it mentions like this specific style of, what was it? Like their loyalty program. And I was just like, you can tell that this is this company because it has this styling of receipt. And they're like, okay, well, I was like, oh, I tell you what, I was like, if I get you we've got at the bottom here, we've got our credit card number. I was like, usually because like part of the problem is in most states you only get a single sales tax number, but it's actually split between the state, the county, and sometimes the city. And so they need to know not just what store, they need to know specifically what location. That way they know what city to go, hey, give us our money back, like refund this man his 1% from y'all or whatever. And I was like, okay. I was like, usually with retail companies, they're, on a credit card statement, it'll say like Dick's, Frisco or whatever. I was like, let me check the credit card statement. So I went back to the client. I'm like, hey, can you pull these credit card statements? And sure enough, it specifically said like the exact location. I was like, okay, so I can match the credit card statement to the bottom half of this receipt that doesn't tell you what company it's from, but the receipt numbers match. We've got the dates. This tells you what store. I was like, does this work? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, there's an extra, $1,500 on this submission. That works. So again, for them, my experience has generally been pretty positive with the auditors. And I think part of that is that a lot of our process also is about making their life easier. Because I've done enough of these now and talked to enough auditors that I kind of know what their process and what they're looking for. And so we, after our first big submission with JASM and going through that longer process with an auditor, I was talking to them afterwards. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be doing this a lot moving forward. What can I do to make your life easier? Like, what can I do to make it to where your day is a little less terrible doing this job? And they were like, oh, well, I had to open every single receipt and pull this piece of information. I'm like, okay, that'll never be a thing again. I was like, we will have that, all of that information will always be like ready for you in the Excel file. I was like, there's, no reason for you to ever have to worry about any of these things when, I've got employees who can take care of it. And so I don't know that the auditors would always be friendly with everybody, but they've always been friendly with us. But again, we come to the table trying to make their life easier, and with the experience to make their life easier. I don't submit anything that's under $1, even though by the time I know it's under $1, we've already spent all the labor on our end to do it. It's just because if I was an auditor, that would irritate the hell out of me. You're making me look at a 25-cent sales tax refund on it. Like, this is nonsense. So like I feel like $1 is a cutoff where anything below that would irritate pretty much any normal human being. So we try to do those kind of things because the auditors, they're never going to break never say never, but they're never going to break the law or anything like that. But that doesn't mean they can't make your life more difficult than you want it to be, right? Instead of getting one credit card statement, they just be like, oh no, we want every single credit card statement that matches every single receipt. Pull it all. There's things that they could definitely do that are within the law, the lines of the law, but that still make our life just much more difficult than it needs to be. And also, I just frankly don't like making people's lives more difficult. So yeah, we've had a lot of success with it, and even in places where I really didn't think we were going to get those receipts with them cut in half, and they still just came through, and we're really, really friendly about it. Honestly, there was no pushback. But yeah,
that's amazing. So, we've walked through the whole process, and we kind of figured out what you guys do and what people need to do, and so. We always like to kind of wrap these up with like a lightning round of questions, just things to help the listener. So if you could put a message on a billboard that every Amazon seller would see, what would it say?
Pet peeve of mine. I've been harping on this for almost a decade. So I'm an economics nerd, was economics major in college. Learn what the sunk cost fallacy is, and then realize that whenever you use your cost of goods sold to set up your mins and your maxes on your repricer, that you are engaging in the sunk cost fallacy every single time. It doesn't matter what you spent on a product. All that should determine how you reprice is what the product currently is doing and what you expect it to do in the future. And in the future, based on your cost to hold something. There's so many products, especially in like footwear. One that really, really popped up to me was here, like right before COVID. I want to say 2019. All the Marshalls got in, a Nike football cleat, and I mean it was nice. But Marshalls has a policy of never pricing at the time a spiked cleat that wasn't a golf shoe above $20, no matter the MSRP. These were 120 MSRP football cleats that were selling out consistently in every colorway at $250 to $350 on Amazon. Every single Marshall's got 5 to 10 of them, and within a month, the price had tanked to $45. And then 3 months later, they were back to 200 plus, because all that happened was somebody set their repricer on an ROI basis, and so they went, oh, I paid 20, set my max at 200%. And so, okay, like, sure, you set your max at 60 and you set your min at 45, but this was a shoe that literally wasn't stockable at 250 in the middle of summer. It wasn't even football cleat season, and you couldn't keep it in stock at 250. And I have never had, I so badly wanted to roll the dice on third party A to A that summer. I just wanted to pick a couple of sizes in the best colors and just clear every single person under $100 going into back to school. And I just, too scared of Amazon, I guess. But I see stuff like that all over the place. You're doing store closing sales. And it goes both ways, right? If you paid $100 for something and something happens where it's never going above 20 again, it doesn't matter that you paid $100. It doesn't matter that you made a mistake. If you're never going to recover the money, then you just get what you can out of it. But there's times where I'll get 90% off at, Target or a Walmart on clearance, or sometimes I see footwear 95% off, and I'll see other people who got it at a similar price point, and because they use ROI-based repricers, they leave massive amounts of money on the table. And I don't care what I paid. I care what a customer will pay, and I care where I expect it to go. And especially it's one thing when you're in categories like beauty or even toys, where most of that stuff at some point will get restocked at wholesalers and the price will come down. But a lot of times with footwear, that colorway is never getting produced again. Mm-hmm. So almost every shoe that was released at, say, an Adidas at the outlets, those tank, and they tank basically down to break even. A whole bunch of people just give away money for some reason, and then if you hold for 6 months, they're 3-4 times what they went down to. And it's like, if you do the math on what your interest rates, even if you had to do the worst thing in the world and carry it on a credit card, that's 2% a month. It's a 25-cent storage fee on a pair of shoes. Why are you giving that item away? Anyway, sorry. It was supposed to be a lightning round. I just went way off in the weeds. I am so sorry. It's just the
sunk cost fallacy is a huge one. We've talked about that multiple times.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of it, right? I do it regularly, even with repricing. But and it's terrible because it takes a bunch of time. But it's probably the single most important thing you can do in your business is put more time into your repricer, and nobody gives them any attention or time. I don't give it nearly as much attention and time as I should, because my brain's like, oh, I should be outsourcing. It's like, yeah, but an extra 2 or 3% on every single sale, if I get my repricer in better order, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of ROI.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's the big one for me. Just like, pay more attention to your repricing min and max. Don't just rely on some percentage calculator. They're bad, and you're leaving money on the table.
What's the best question that you've been asked in the last 3 months? Whether it's a business question or something that's made you kind of think deeper as a person.
Probably if I'm charging enough, which I know sounds ridiculous, but and I've heard it many times, and every time I do, I always just need to stop and kind of rethink things. And a lot of times there's stuff where when I started doing it, I was making enough money on that time, but as I've expanded my skill set and the thing, what my hourly is worth, I'm still doing those things that maybe are no longer worth my time because it's a moving target. And I think that's probably the big one, is that I just occasionally get reminded of that, usually by, I imagine, a Facebook mutual of ours, Mike Garner. And he always has phenomenal business posts. Really wish he would actually do some social media.
I wish he would do a course. I'd buy it. I'd be the first one in line to buy it.
Right. And I'm generally pretty anti-course. There's only 2 or 3 people that I find them interesting from. And it's you, and I really wish he would. He talked about it at one point, and then never never went there. Felt like he couldn't figure out how to bring enough value to the table and make it worth his time at the price point he would want it. So, but yeah, no, great guy. But yeah, that's probably the big one.
So we're both big readers, Chris and I. So I'm curious, what's one book that you've gifted or recommended the most?
So the one I've gifted and recommended the most in general, and I know it's a pick, it's a go-to pick by everybody, but it really bears repeating. How to Make Friends and Influence People it's really good. It's really, really good, and I don't really care what you're doing. It's good if you're in sales, if you're in business, if you are at a party. It is a phenomenal book that somehow stands the test of time to a weird degree, in my opinion, for a book written in the 30s. And I think that's my number one general recommendation. And usually my follow up, because everybody who isn't in business wants to be a small business owner, which I think personally, I think owning your own business is overrated. I mean, I think it's great if that's if you're the person for it, right? But like my business partner wasn't. Some people probably shouldn't be owners. There's a lot of stress that comes with it that you wouldn't have to deal with if you clocked out in a 9 to 5, right? But I know it's not a popular thing to say in this industry and this kind of field, but it's just my view. But the number one thing I recommend to business people and people, especially people who are like, oh, I really want to, do my own business. I cannot recommend the E-Myth highly enough. I'm sure y'all both have read it or at least know of it. That is my go-to because some people are cut out for business and should be in it, but I need people to know that, being a great plumber doesn't make you great at running a plumbing business. They're totally separate skill sets. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do not realize that.
Yeah. Those are two solid choices. What's one underrated tool that you can't live without in your business?
So I would say that, and it's rated very highly, but quite frankly, it's not rated highly enough. Keepa is the end all be all of this business. I would give up every other single piece of software in a heartbeat against Keepa, and it's not even close. When they started charging for the information that we need for our business, I remember a lot of people complaining over a $20 a month charge. And I remember posting them popularly. I was like, look, I don't know why y'all are complaining. I wish they charge $1,000 a month, because if they charge $1,000 a month, 90% of my competition would be out of business in 6 months, and this would just be a totally different ballgame because their data is that good. They are undercharging for it. I would say that I am probably an advanced Keepa user, but honestly, I probably need to spend the time and money to take your course on it, to be perfectly honest. There is so much data there, and it hasn't been static either. They've been adding to it over the years. If you haven't dug into some of those tabs, there's a lot of stuff there that was not there even 18 months ago. Mm-hmm. Stuff that has actively transformed my business once I kind of understood how to incorporate it. And I don't even think it's close. I'd give up my repricers. I give up every scanning software. Keepa is the single most important thing that we have as an Amazon seller, and I don't think people talk about it like that, and they should. People should take your course on it, frankly, because most people are not very good at it.
I think you're spot on there. Keepa is absolutely the king. Now, I know there are going to be people who are interested in refundsalestax.com. They're going to maybe be interested in giving you a follow. Where should people go to find out about you, to find out about the business and all of that?
They should go to the show notes, because I need to go create a public facing account because I did not think that through. I'm not, in the past, I've mostly been a B2B one-on-one kind of business where I really just, if I'm interacting with clients or potential clients, it's a one-to-one kind of relationship. And I really hope to keep that for the most part with this business as well, as long as I can. But this is kind of my first time venturing out to more of a mass market kind of business. And so I'll be honest, I'm not very good at it, which is exactly why I brought, Nate on board. is to kind of help with that side of things, because I know where my I know where my strengths are, and it's not generalized marketing. Case in point, I literally do not have my socials in place, which is kind of embarrassing. I apologize. But they'll be in place by the time the show goes live, so just check the show notes.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll have them down there. And I'll tell you what, come on over to Twitter. The water is warm, and refund sales tax is available as a handle.
All right.
All right. Yeah. So make sure to check the show notes. There'll be a link there to refund sales tax. There'll be a link there to social media. Shoot Casey a follow wherever your preferred social media is. And we always end the show with a quote of the week, and I thought this one was spot on. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have any attribution, but the quote of the week is, "The most valuable skill in business is knowing where the money is hiding." And honestly, I think this quote kind of sums up the whole episode. We do often find ourselves chasing that next flip instead of finding those places where we can claw some money back from the government, where we can claw an extra 1 or 2% in properly repricing. And we sleep on way too many of those opportunities. So, Casey, this was incredibly informative. For those of you who are interested, check out refundsalestax.com. And thanks for being on the show. That's the pod, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.